Welcome everyone to the second day of 2024 Open Ed Week. We're very excited in order to give a series of presentations. This presentation that we are presenting here is focusing on a recent partnership that was established in November. So just 3-4 months ago between LibreTexts, Sandbox AQ, and a handful of other individuals in order to advance AI in the OER world. What we're going to do with this presentation is have Marianna from Sandbox AQ introduce herself and her team, and then move forward with the bigger picture that exists in the partnership outside of just LibreText, and then I'll come back in order to bring some context off of that, and we can discuss some details associated with that. So with that, feel free to take the screen, Marianna, and advance as you see fit.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. And it's funny to be back here again. So I've given presentations for Open Ed Week before, but wearing the hat of being a faculty. And now I've come over to Sandbox AQ to help lead the education team. And it's been really a wild ride and amazing. So thank you for welcoming me back in this new role. So I'm Marianna Bonanome, Head of External Education Programs here at Sandbox AQ. And I'll let my team introduce themselves. I see we have Constantine on the line, but we also have some others. We have Paul. I saw Paul Kassenbaum is also here. So why don't we start with Constantine and then we can ping it to Paul.
Everyone, is my mic working correctly? Looks like it is.
All good.
Great. I'm not an audio engineer, but I am an AI scientist. So I do a lot of the prototype work at Sandbox AQ. So I duct tape things together and make them look good.
Hi, I'm Paul Kassenbaum. I'm the technical director at Sandbox AQ. I'm a theoretical physicist, and I'm responsible for the interlock between our public sector team and all of our technical teams in quantum communications, quantum sensing, and quantum simulation. Back to you, Marianna.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here. So as Delmar mentioned, to kind of set the framework for the partners on this. So in November or December, I forget when it was, Delmar, it must have been November, our CEO, Jack Hittery, CEO of Sandbox AQ, kind of tasked me with this challenge to do some exciting work. AI and education, and let's see if we can try to upskill some underrepresented groups, namely girls and women, into the healthcare space. And so this was a huge challenge, and it was with Sandbox AQ and the female quotient. So Shelly Zalis is the CEO, and she's a powerhouse, and she really works to reduce all the gaps for women, the pay gap, the leadership gap, so on and so forth. And she runs these amazing women's lounges at big world stages, such as Davos. And so the two CEOs, the female quotient, Shelly Zalis and Jack Hittery, were saying, let's have a bright spot. Let's use AI for some good. There's been a lot of doom and gloom messaging. Let's do something where we can have a positive impact. So I sat on that and chewed on it for a while, coming from my open source background, thinking through what can we do that is going to really be meaningful and useful. And of course, I thought of my co-founder, Andrew Parker, who should be joining at some point. Andrew and I worked together when I was a professor at the City University of New York, same math department. We worked on a lot of open source work, the WebWork project, and also with Delmar. And then, of course, I thought of Delmar. And so we gave Delmar a call and said, what's going on in terms of AI? What do you have on your platform? And Delmar, what was your response to me?
I have no memory at all of the conversation.
Your response was, we've been holding off for a year. People have come to us and wanted to do work with us in the AI space. And your response was, I've been holding off to see how the space shakes out and find someone that's a trusted partner. And so when we approached you, you said, okay, I'm listening. Let's talk. Let's see what we can do. And so I introduced Delmar to our amazing AI scientists. Constantine is one of them. And we took off from there. And so we really were working together to see if we can build something useful that didn't have a lot of the downsides of a traditional large language model. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But before we jump into that, I'll give you a little bit of background, and I'll keep it brief, a little bit of background about our company. The A and the Q, AI and quantum, as Paul alluded to. And so in this space, we do not build quantum computers. However, we do use quantum particles, quantum sensors, obviously for sensing. So we take that quantum information and we need AI, sophisticated AI, to enable the tech that we're building. So for instance, I'll kind of fast forward in a minute. For instance, we have all of these applications across 3 different verticals, some of them in the healthcare space, some of them in the navigation space, and so on and so forth. But really, the 2 of these need to come together in order for our tech to work at all. A little bit more of our history. We spun out of Google X early 2022. Jack Hidary, our CEO, wrote a book on quantum computing. But we have so many amazing research scientists on our team. I was really excited to work with Delmar, being a chemist. We hold the world record for density functional theory computation, so quantum chemistry computation to date. And we also do work in cybersecurity and so on. So we really are at heart kind of built around the core of research, and then thinking about world-changing, positive world-changing applications that we can bring to market from that lens. And so I alluded to some of these verticals: simulation and optimization. So that's where we do a lot of our quantum chemistry for drug discovery, materials, battery science, and so on. We have quantum security and communications as well. And then the quantum sensing, which I mentioned. And then the AI team, which Constantine leads up, the AI team works, of course, across all of these verticals, as does the education team. And the AI team and the education team, we work super closely together. We consider Constantine part of our team, and I hope that Constantine considers me part of his, as well as the public sector team. Paul Kassenbaum, when we started, Paul was a huge support to us with his background as a physicist and his background in the educational space. Huge support. So we're really lucky to have such a really incredible team that has such expertise from crossing over boundaries. I'm going to let Constantine speak to this in a minute. But as I mentioned, the AI that works for us, the AI that we do in general, is way more than just generative AI. I know that's been in the news lately, but really the AI that we use really takes quantum data, takes all kinds of data and makes it into something useful. Gets a signal that's useful so that we can do medical diagnostics, so that we can do point location, and so on and so forth. So this is way beyond just LLMs. But introducing us on the education team, I mentioned we consider Constantine and Paul as part of our education team, but we really do work to educate the world on AI and quantum. And we've built an amazing, diverse, and robust team, and our backgrounds aren't all in quantum. So we have evolutionary ecology, we have neuroscience, of course we have quantum, but the list goes on and on, physics. And so this project we started with Delmar, we started to narrow it. So we looked at the corpus that LibreTexts has, which I'm sure you know is enormous, 2,200 textbooks and counting, and then 200,000 problems across many open problem libraries. So how do we narrow it down so there's something that concrete we can start with? So we decided to focus on the nursing library within the medicine library. So the nursing content really gave us a way to start thinking through, if we set up a retrieval augmented generative model, which Constantine will talk about, if we set this up, what can the corpus be that it's pulling from? And so we really wanted to work on creating this AI tool to work with the LibreTexts nursing corpus so that we can run a few pilots with girls and women in underserved communities. So this was really finally, after chewing on the idea and that challenge that my CEO gave us, this is kind of what we kind of landed on here. And here are our partners. We mentioned the female quotient, Shelley Zalis and the female quotient, but we have others, Future Brilliant, Sophia Swire. They do a lot of work with girls in refugee camps and educating them and getting their skills. So we really do have, we've been talking to folks at Workbay and the Fifth Element, and the list goes on and on. So as we're thinking through this pilot, we're really open to getting feedback from folks because we're going to need this as we build it out. We want to make sure that our tool has efficacy. You know, we're really thinking about making something very useful. And if it's not useful, then we're going to iterate on it and change it so that it is useful. But these are the partners that we're looking at. I want to pause because I want to give Constantine and Delmar space to kind of chime in here.
I mean, you're doing a beautiful job. I'm very excited with what you're doing here, especially since I don't have to present, or at least not present quite as much here. I mean, the one thing that I want to bring up here that is a particularly importance in this sort of push here is, you know, over the last 16 years that the LibreTexts project and its precursor, the ChemWiki, existed, a guiding principle behind how we wanted to grow was to recognize that there's a fragmentation of OER in the OER landscapes. In other words, you could find content in a wide variety of different places, and the vast majority of organizational infrastructures are more referatory than repository. And that makes it difficult in order to be able to do a handful of different things that I feel was necessary in the OER landscape to do. And remixing is one of them. So if you remix across different platforms, it becomes quite painful in order to be able to do. Painful doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means it has a bigger barrier. And the whole point of advancing OER is to try to remove that barrier in order to move forward. Now, fast forward to 2024, and many of us, if not all of us, have been exposed to OER. We've been exposed to a great deal of hype/hyperbole out there. It's still entirely unclear about where things are advancing. We know where we want to go with this, but the key point behind the advancement of large language models is to be able to take a corpus of content and use that to train those models. And this is where you hear with OpenAI coming in order to be able to advance over, you know, stealing, and I'm going to use the word stealing very loosely, although it's also quite applicable, the content and the internet and bring it together and such like that. So what we have done is, by centralizing our corpus in order to handle this fragmentation approach for an entirely different reason than AI, generate an infrastructure that has 950,000 pages of content, 650,000 or 700,000 in English, provides an optimal infrastructure for training of models. Not at the AI ChatGPT level, but at being able to have a more concerted, directed approach, like what Marianna was mentioning here. It's ideal in order to be able to advance that. And if you have things straddled across different platforms and different areas of that, it becomes difficult in order to be able to implement that. So the stars were aligned in order to make it so that what we had done is well suited in order to be able to advance that. And it applies not just to textbooks, which we've been advancing since 2008, but also to homework systems. So thanks to the California Education Learning Lab, we've been building a central corpus of homework questions that people are able to capitalize on and move forward. And that could be trained just as well. Models can be trained off of that just as well as off the textbooks, which Marianna mentioned. I'm not sure if Constantine is going to be discussing that. So that's the context behind these things. I'm very excited about this. And Marianna didn't mention it, but we had made the agreement, unless they decide to pull back, that what's being generated here is open source models. Right? Still thumbs up off of that, so that this is available for people to grab and run if you have the appropriate hardware in order to be able to run on it. And it's not necessarily a simple thing in order to do that. So with that, I'll step back and I'll let Constantine talk forward off of that. So.
Yes, absolutely. And before we pass this to Constantine, I just want to get to the right slide. We mentioned this already. We're focusing on the nursing. And one more thing to make note of, which makes this even more exciting, is the partnership that LibreTexts has with OpenRN. Maybe you can speak a little bit about that, Delmar.
Yes. OpenRN is the second cohort organization from the Open Textbook Pilot that started in 2018. We were the first inaugural awardee for that award, and we've been hosting their content. They've also hosted on other platforms for a while. It's been quite popular on our infrastructure. And then last year, we partnered with the same group under a different branding, the Next Generation RN, in order to expand the ADAPT homework system to not just being able to have more conventional homework questions, and I use the term conventional very loosely here, but to actually advance it with the next generation NextLex nursing question infrastructure. So in other words, make it so that we can use OER, let me phrase that, advance, adapt to advancing the OER approach off of that. We're very excited with them because we've also expanded to bringing in not just the OpenRN people, but the 15 campuses that are part of the Wisconsin Technical School college infrastructure, and they're joining the LibreNet consortium, and they get access to ADAPT and other components off of that. So lots of benefits associated with joining our consortium. We're very happy in order to work with them in order to advance these things. Advance everything that's related to nursing, and to accompany that with other teams that are part of LibreNet projects that are also contributing to the nursing corpus.
Thank you for that. So as we all know, we're thinking through all of the ways that AI will augment, make more accessible education applications, but so many other applications. So just looking through, what are some of these benefits? There's potential here. Of course, personalization, that's one of the big things. Thinking through using AI to help as a tutor, increasing accessibility for underserved populations and in underserved areas, personalization of the learning plans, data-driven decision-making. This list goes on, and I'm sure I've missed a bunch of them as well. So there's enormous potential here, but thinking through logistically, how do we make this happen so that we have some kind of guardrails on it? Because with the potential, of course, there are many downsides if we kind of, my mom always had that expression, and I know Paul will laugh at this, the bull in the china shop. We don't want to be the bull in the china shop just coming in and breaking things. We want to be mindful. I know Paul likes when the Brooklyn comes out of me. We want to be mindful as we build this tech, because it's education, it's our students' lives, especially it's medical knowledge, healthcare knowledge. All of this makes it very, very sensitive. So, how do we help mitigate any potential, downsides here? I'm gonna let Constantine speak to this a little bit, because Delmar definitely wanted us to highlight these benefits. And these have to do with the RAG model that we're using underneath. So I'm gonna pass this slide to Constantine if you're okay with it.
Sure. So in the process of building this, we wanted to go beyond just a basic RAG implementation. Those are quite popular and those are everywhere. So we're constantly in discussion. Perhaps Delmar will say not enough, but we're constantly in discussion with him and the LibreTexts team, trying to come up with features that add meaningful capability to this system so that it actually benefits the students and isn't just like a shiny, AI sticker that we can to place on this. And here are some of our ideas, but for every idea we come up with, I'm sure there are 10 that we miss. So the art is always to try to listen more than to speak.
Thank you for that, Constantine. Hold on, I want to make sure that I'm not on mute. Ooh, yeah. Okay, so talking about this, here are some of the features, and we'll show you more examples here. But when we started out, of course, the obvious was make sure that our retrieval augmented generative system, our RAG system, is of course hooked up to the corpus that we want it to be hooked up to, that nursing corpus. From that nursing corpus, we wanted to be able to generate learning plans, examples, explanations, all of this based on this specific retrieval. But what's so cool about it, and I'll show you more later in the slides, is that it doesn't just give you natural language summarization, it also gives you clickable links so that, first of all, the rate of hallucinations is reduced because we're directing it towards a specific corpus, but also then having the links to the primary sources is also very important so that you can go back and double check and make sure, okay, and read more on what that summary is that the AI tool is giving you.
Can you define hallucination for those people who may not be familiar with the term?
Am I allowed to curse? make shit up. How about that? The AI tool isn't always going to give you something that is based in the real world. It'll be like, oh, this is close to what may happen in the real world, and I'm just going to give this as an answer. Sometimes it's so astoundingly convincing that it could get you into trouble. So did anyone hear about that attorney who asked ChatGPT to give a summarization with some like cases and citations, and like brought this to the judge in question for a particular case, and they got in major trouble because, first of all, the AI tool gave a response that had folks who have authored things in the same combinations before and gave citations that sound like they're based in reality, but they actually did not exist. They were not correct, and the judge threw it out and like threw a fit, and yeah, so that does happen. So that's why you want to make sure whatever you get as output from an AI tool, you want to cross-check and double-check and look at some primary sources just to be sure. I'm sure Constantine has a lot to say about that as well.
I am more than happy to go into hallucinations if that is something that interests people. I was reading the chat. There was a good side discussion going on.
I love it. Mirage, I like that. Less ableist. Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and in fact, like I said, the clickable links is something to me that is game changing, because generally when an LLM does the summary, it's trained on, most of the big ones are trained on, most of the internet. And so for them to be able to say, oh, I summarize, this is what I was reading, and here's a summary, and click here if you want to know where I'm pulling this from, that generally does not mostly happen. And this is really directed. So it'll look at the corpus you want it to look at, and it can read all the texts that you suggest. And so it'll give you a summary, and then it'll give you, a list of textbooks that you can click on. And it could be maybe not the book that you were reading, but one of the other books in the library, which is really cool. So, it should be a really, really helpful tool. I'm going to let Constantine take over for this technical part. We'll talk a little bit more about RAGs.
So, as usual, Marianna has already beaten me a bit to the punch with the discussion of mirages. I will go over, very broadly speaking, how LLMs work. I'm happy to go into more detail for those interested, but I figured I would go over the highest level details first, and then I'll let Marianna talk about our collaboration some more, and then we can have a QA session. So LLMs fundamentally are statistical machines. So the way that they learn is they find patterns between words that appear close to each other, words that appear in the same sentence, sentences that appear together in the same paragraph, and so on and so forth. They're extremely large, and they learn very high level, very high order correlations between these words, and that's how they learn a sense of meaning. Slowly roll there, Marianna. I'm still. We'll get to this. This is RAG, but if you could, yes, thank you. So, as they're learning conventionally, they're absorbing these learnings, these semantic correlations into their parameters. So they're effectively memorizing. And if we want an LLM to output something, they do so probabilistically. So for example, we might want to complete the phrase I used to. Perhaps one might say have hair. I am aware that this is likely my destiny. There's the famous song by Tears for Fears. Everybody wants to rule the world. Or no, this is Coldplay. I'm mixing them up. It's a bit newer. And then if you've ever played Skyrim, I used to be an adventurer like you, was very popular on the internet in the early 2010s. The point is, these RAGs, they have these distributions over words that they've generated. And that's why that if you ask an LLM the same question, they might not always give the same output. And that's also why these kinds of theoretical guarantees on like an LLM will never say this is difficult, because you have to change the underlying distribution of the model in order to get guarantees. So you're kind of juxtaposing non-probabilistic desires onto a probabilistic machine, and that's where things tend to take a turn. So, and that's I'm glossing over an entire field of AI here, but again, I'm happy to answer questions later. Where RAG comes in is now, instead of relying on the machine's memory, we're pulling documents. And this is kind of like cue cards. So I ask an LLM a question, and I'll go into how it does this, but it pulls relevant information from sources. Ideally, these sources are written by humans, or at least verified by humans, but people like to stack AI on top of AI, so who knows? But it pulls sources, and this, in our case, specifically LibreTexts, and those are verified, which is why it's a very nice data set. And it uses those in generating. So it uses those to modify the distribution that it's sampling from. So it doesn't guarantee that there are no mirages, but it does, empirically, we find significantly reduce the probabilities. All right, next slide, please. So how does specifically the RAG do this? LLMs are able to turn text into vectors. They can embed them into an abstract manifold. We don't know what each dimension means, but the LLM does. And that's different for each LLM. So what one vector means to one LLM is different than what it means to another LLM. They might be different lengths, and there's not a lot of interoperability. So in this case, the LLMs in both these squares have to be the same one. So I have my question, and I have my corpus of data. Beforehand, usually not in real time, but beforehand, I will have broken up my corpus of data into pieces and vectorized each of those pieces. And these vectors try to encapsulate some sort of semantic meaning. So maybe this paragraph is talking about cheese, and the other one is talking about cats. And there are plenty of other dimensions. It's usually not so simplified, but for the sake of example. So I have my unstructured data. I've turned it into vectors. Now I take my question, and using that same model, I also turn it into a vector. And the nice thing about vectors, at least in the space that we're working in, is we can compare them using a dot product. And that gives us a sense of similarity. So how similar is a given paragraph to the question that I've asked? And I can take the 20 most similar paragraphs or chunks of text. They're usually more than a paragraph, but again, for the sake of example, I'll take the 20 most similar paragraphs to my question, and then I'll feed them back into the LLM. So now the LLM sees not only the question that it's being asked, but it's also given a lot of context. And it uses that to generate a response. And there are various strategies to generate responses. There's lots of LLM backfilling that can be done, and lots of complexity can be tacked onto this to make it more robust or to make it more performant. But this is the basic idea of RAG in a nutshell.
Can you comment on the utility of updating RAGs versus updating an LLM by itself?
Thank you. So normally, if you want an LLM to have access to new data, you need to train it on that data. And depending on how much data that you have, or how frequently new data comes in, that might not scale very well. If you have to retrain a model every time new research comes out, that can be expensive. Also, finding a way to delete memories, that's an open area of research. So it's one thing to stuff new information into an LLM. That's a matter of time and money. Removing erroneous information is quite difficult. The benefit of a RAG is because you're searching through for semantically similar information and then feeding that in at the prompt stage, it's very easy to just update your database. Ingest a new piece of text, turn that into a vector, add it to your database. Oh, this book is no longer up to date. We can just remove those entries from our database. We can leverage all kinds of the classical database techniques that we've built over the last half century to our advantage. So that's the nice thing, is we're still leveraging all the learnings of classical database management, but with a shiny new AI layer on top. I will pass the mic back to Marianna and can chime in whenever she feels necessary.
Thank you. And yeah, I'm sure we'll have a lot of Q&A. We want to leave plenty of time for that. So just to give you more of a concrete view of what we've built, again, this is our first go round of it. As you can see, we have, you know, a separate pop out tab for this. So we see our LibreTexts medicine book, the nursing book on the right-hand side, and here's our AI window, our interface with the AI tool. We're thinking through how this might look as an integration, and we'll need some UI UX help on that, but we're looking into it, and that will come. But just to get the basic functionality is what we're after right now, and we're pretty much there. So as you can see here, if you're reading your textbook and you know you're at this section, you may have a question. What is the right process to test for a neck injury after, say, a car accident? Create me a number checklist. And so here, the RAG goes in and pulls from the LibreTexts nursing corpus and gives you a response based on that retrieval. But also, I really like that now you're looking and you have all of these places where you can click and you can read, one of them being, say, maybe the original book you were reading, but then you have the other links, which I think is very cool. As a student, you may want to maybe look across several textbooks if you want an answer. In fact, it's funny, I think back of all the hours I spent in the library, and I remember specifically linear algebra. I had the textbook recommended from the instructor. I had a Shoun's outline. I had 2 or 3 other textbooks, and I would just go between all of them like this. But to be able to have an AI tool do that for you is huge, right? And just say, okay, now click here, and you can read from these other primary sources. To me, this is revolutionary. I really wish I had something like this as a learner.
I'll mention one thing off
Yeah,
of here.
please.
You know, because you have the initial references and the material that's used in order to spit out that response, you can also, in order to satisfy the criteria for using content creatively in the open world, you can provide attributions down there. So you can actually have the full-blown attributions necessary for Creative Commons licensing. Because this is a non-creative response off of there, it doesn't count as an adaptation. So you don't have quite the same issues associated than you would if it were an adaptation. But for those of us that, in terms of using this content, always want to have some level of attributions down to satisfy Creative Commons licensing, that will be one of the components connected here to references. And of course, from an academic perspective, the references are critical in order to advance, instead of just pulling things out of your back pocket that might actually be spit out from ChatGPT or other large language models.
I thought we were allowed to curse, Delmar. I'll let Delmar speak to this experience. This experience is quite interesting here. What was this like, Delmar?
Well, Why did you cut the picture so I'm not actually in the picture?
I actually didn't.
So-
I didn't cut this picture. This picture I got from another slide. Somebody else must have cut your picture. This is so
Someone
funny.
doesn't like me. Yeah, so
No.
we released month and a half ago this partnership, at least publicly commented on it in a panel that the FQ, the female quotient, put together, and the person whose hands up pointing to someone is
That's you.
that's not me. Yeah, we can tell Jack
Where?
that's me.
Oh, that's Jack.
Yeah, yeah.
You were on the side. How come they cut you? How did they even cut you? I got to get a better picture and post it.
Yeah, no worries. But it was a very exciting time in order to be over there, because AI was certainly the not just the du jour topic of conversation, but it was for the whole Davos presentation. Everything was great there, with the exception of me picking up COVID, but that's a different issue. Yeah.
Shall we play this video? Do you want to see our little demo video? It's just a minute long. Yes, no? What do you think, Delmar?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
While this is going, I'll mention that this tutor-based system that Sandbox put together right now, it's side by side with the LibreTexts projects, but we've already started mocking up the infrastructure in order to be able to embed this as a tutor on the side of books. Again, to from my perspective, I pitch this from the argument. This right here is I digress. This right here is a next generation question that popped up there. Anyways, in order to make the textbook engaging, because again, the greater the engagement is between the students and the textbook and the resources, mostly invariably, I know it's a little redundant, increases learning. So if this is one mechanism in order to get students in order to interact with the textbook, I'm all game for that, as long as we can address the hallucinations or mirages or and other issues that I think we have a very good infrastructure in place in order to be able to advance. I'm very excited about this.
And so just to wrap up, where are we thinking that where can this potentially live? Why are we partnering with the female quotient and the others? Well, the idea was that we could potentially pilot this in a few classrooms and on a small scale, keeping it really laser focused on the nursing content. And the idea was many folks may not even have access to the internet. Many underserved populations in different remote parts of the world, no internet, maybe no mobile devices either. How do we get this to them? And so we kind of looked at the work that I did with my co-founder Andrew Parker at CUNY, where we did this because we didn't have enough computer classrooms. So what we did was we just got these iPad carts from the Apple Education Store, and we had all of these iPads, and a lot of the open educational resources that we authored ourselves, we loaded onto these iPads. In our case, we did have internet access, so we did that, but there's no reason why we couldn't preload devices so that we have the LibreTexts corpus. And then if we had a powerful enough central device and we network these devices, we could have, all of LibreTexts on there, but also the AI tool on there and network these devices. So we can potentially get this into classrooms where they wouldn't have had access before. And so we started pricing this out. What would it cost? And it's a pretty reasonable cost to spec out a smart classroom like this. And so we started chatting with our network through the female quotient and others. We already have folks in India. We spoke with the former Minister of Education, and he already has 2 schools lined up in the Commonwealth, wanting to work with us and pilot this. We have a school in Pakistan through Future Brilliance, Sophia Swire. She has a school that she wants to pilot this in. And then also we've been in contact with the United Way. And so looking at a school in Nigeria And then last week I was in the UAE, and the Minister of Education loved this. And he gave us a short list of nursing schools who are accredited. And I have a list of schools to reach out to who can potentially run a little pilot with us. But we might have to look at their content. So that would be a little bit different. But, you know, there's huge potential here, and we're really excited about this project. So I want to make sure that we leave space for questions, because I'm sure you have a lot of them. So thank you all.
Thank you, Marianna. Thank you, Constantine. I'll just mention one or two small aspects connected to it. As many of you know, OpenStax is about to release 9 nursing textbooks. It's not entirely clear to me what the content is in that textbooks and how much might be harvested from open RNs or other resources. But we've already started to prepare the infrastructure in order to harvest it into our libraries, and that's going to be going straight into the AI in order to augment this along with the open RN and a handful of other resources that's connected. Lastly, and we've been working on this for a while. The pandemic slowed it down when it should have accelerated it, but we're excited in order to revisit it. And that's the implementation of what we refer to as LibreTexts in a phone and LibreTexts in a box. That's where you're able to load the LibreTexts libraries or parts of the libraries into a Raspberry Pi box that could act as a mechanism in order to distribute the content. If, and it's a very, very big if, you can fold AI into it, then you might be able to provide this to students that have limited access to high-speed internet, which is particularly important. Similarly, at least focusing on the textbook side, we'll be releasing this summer the LibreText in a phone, where you're able to download the library or individual books on your phone in order to be accessed outside of the high-speed internet. We've been pursuing grants for a while in order to make it so that the homework system that we have, the ADAPT homework system, is able to be used offline, and then you can upload scores when you get access to internet at various points. That may or may not come around soon in order to complement these things, but we're very excited in order to be able to provide mechanisms in order to distribute content, whether it's raw content that's on our platform or refined content through an AI to the students of the world. So that's my context. And I think unless Marianna and Constantine have anything to say, we can open things up to a conversation. I know several of you have been commenting things in the chat, but I don't want to. I think most of them have been addressed. So does anyone have any questions or concerns that they want to bring up? This is far more quiet than I was expecting, especially from many of you that I know that have been quite active. Anna, I think you asked a question here. Did I miss it? Or do you want to rephrase it?
Sure. I'm just curious, because I've been experimenting with sort of the systems that mix web search with LLMs, how this kind of RAG setup would compare to, say, searching on Perplexity and telling it to limit its sources to LibreText.org, but asking it the same kinds of content questions. I'm imagining that RAG is much better at focusing on a specific corpus, but I'm just curious.
Well, I can't say for sure how Perplexity.ai does its search, but I'm sure it's probably using RAG as well. In this case, the difference is more, are you searching through the internet or are you searching through a database? And the nice thing about a database is you can use classical like filtering techniques. So you can say only pull from nursing textbooks. So if there's a story about an evil nurse in like the fiction section, then you don't pull that, which probably would be not the best thing to be pulling from when generating a response. That's my speculation, by the way. That's how I imagine maybe the difference would be.
Thank you. That totally makes sense. Yeah.
Anna,
Yeah, and
oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to point out that, especially even in the first generation of the tool that we built, you can choose your library. So you can choose from a nursing library or whatever it is. And that's really cool, because so you know exactly where you're directing your RAG at. And then in terms of resources, right, it helps you bandwidth wise, it helps you be very concentrated and really be very effective with the resources you do have. You know, we don't have to search through this entire internet. And even if you're focusing just on LibreTexts, this is saying in this database, which I know to be updated because I have direct access to it, look here. So, you know, that's something to be mindful of. Sorry, go ahead, Delmar.
Well, I was just bringing up something that Anna mentioned in some social media platform, and I don't know which one it was because there's so many that she's active on, about the prospect of being able to fold in feedback, whether it's a simple Boolean thumbs up or thumbs down, or something more detailed from in order to help hone the development of things. And I don't know if the RAG/LM model is able to use that feedback constructively in order to help reduce any mirages that may escape or not. I'm putting you guys on the spot because we haven't discussed this at all. If you feel that you wanted to talk about this behind the scenes first, then that's also a perfectly fair response.
Well, I'm always happy to speculate. So there's a field called reinforcement learning from human feedback. There's also from AI feedback, because again, people like to stack AI on top of AI. It is done where people will have an LLMs that produce output using, you know, whatever way to generate the prompt that they like, and based on perhaps oftentimes they'll give multiple responses. They'll say like, oh, this is the most likely response I would give. This is maybe number 2, number 3, or just multiple random samples since they are probabilistic. And then people can say, I like this response the best because maybe because this one is the most factually accurate, or because this one, you know, speaks in the style of conversation that is most relevant to me. So maybe this one speaks in formal language because this is a business setting, or this one speaks in, you know, whatever slang I use with my
Stack
friend.
Exchange, the way Stack Exchange does it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And in fact, Stack Exchange makes for great learning data sets for these kinds of things. So that is actually exactly it. So it's very possible to add that kind of mechanism to it in the future. These things are pretty modular, so you could probably stack that on top. We won't be doing that anytime soon, but it would be cool if we did.
Great.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Anna. One more thing that I was thinking of that's kind of related to this tangentially is when we have those assessments hooked up. So when the RAG is retrieving the assessments from the open problem libraries that have, say, nursing assessments from that. So you can say, quiz me on, you know, patient positioning, and the RAG will give you a random sample of the relevant assessment so that you can quiz yourself. There's no reason why you couldn't capture that data from that interaction. Of course, you're using it formatively, but there's no reason why we couldn't be seeing, okay, as the learner interacts with the AI tool and these assessments get delivered, how is that learner doing on these assessments? And then judging that over time, maybe. So there's a huge learning engineering opportunity that I'm seeing here that makes me very excited as, you know, as an educator. And, you know, whatever you learn from that can then help you iterate on the tool to make it more effective as time goes on. You know, it also speaks to the quality of the assessments. You know, there's a lot to untangle there, of course. However, there's a huge potential there if you want to run some experiments to see what that data says.
Definitely. I mean, we've been working on more traditional learning analytics infrastructure, at least at a topical level, with dashboards and maybe an early warning system in order to try to identify students that are potentially at risk in order to implement an intervention when it's useful in order to implement an intervention. But those are more machine learning based models. Here's the data, and past performances in that class and starting to build models off of that. The idea of actually introducing more powerful infrastructure like AI, I don't want to say scares me, but certainly is a paradigm shift that I need to be I just need to be exposed to before I jump for joy that it's going to solve everything that's out there. But there's lots of really cool stuff that's out there.
It's worth mentioning that whenever AI gets involved in like more policy decisions, like whether or not to host some sort of intervention for a student, that's when we have to be even more careful about any kinds of biases in the model or something like that. Now, if you're just looking at someone's grades, there's not a lot of bias to draw from as far as I know, but obviously there will always be arguments. Well, if you put in more data, more magic happens. And so that's indeed something that is very much worth discussing. But then more caveats come with more complexity.
Yeah, well, I look forward to further conversations on this. So we have a few minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions for the experts that are here? And I guess me regarding AI and the efforts that we're doing. Like I said, I'm very excited about what we were doing. I'm very excited that Marianna approached me and so excited I didn't even remember the conversation as well as she did for that. But there's lots of really cool stuff that's going to come out of here, and I think that this is one of the better ways in order to do things rather than just grabbing a ChatGPT and having it solve everything that we want. I can mention amusing unless anyone else wants to bring up. It looks like Peralta is in the house here.
Oh, hi. Sorry. My name's Charlotte. I'm with Berkeley City College. For some reason, it doesn't have my name on the ID. So this was fascinating. And I'm sorry, I joined the call late and I may have missed this. I'm curious why nursing is the first area you're using for this project. And then if you have plans to expand to other subject areas.
Yes, thank you for that. Yeah, so nursing came out of our partnership with the Female Quotient and Future Brilliance. What they were finding as they were trying to upskill women and girls is that in a lot of remote parts of the world, this is a huge need, that a lot of females really prefer healthcare aides and assistants and doctors to be female. And so there's this huge gap from the need to those that are skilled in it. And so if we can offer this as, you know, a pathway to an amazing career for folks by skilling girls and women and getting them into the healthcare field, that would be huge. So this was really inspired by working with our partners. And then when Delmar and I chatted and we were kind of brainstorming, trying to figure out, you know, what should we focus on? First of all, there was that clear need coming from the partners. But then when I learned the partnership with OpenRN, we were like, wow. And so Delmar showed me the amazing nursing repository. I was like, this is incredible. And it really resonated. Like I said, I was in Abu Dhabi and Dubai last week. They have similar needs. And they were like, here are our nursing, you know, accredited universities. Choose one and let's go. Let's run a pilot. Like they were so excited. This seems to really resonate with people. And I think that, of course, we have to offer, you know, the tool with the content that's relevant to the local community, but also we also have to work with partners so that the folks can have their clinical you know, residency as well. You know, they need to be able to work with, you know, the medical institutions that are local so that they can get that practical experience. So we're being mindful that, you know, there's more to it than just AI, clearly, especially in this space. But we feel like if we can figure out these hard questions around healthcare, the rest of it will also come. Like there's huge potential here. We see it. I come from a STEM background. I'm a mathematician. Delmar is a chemist. So we care very much about these computationally oriented assessments and materials. So that for us is also no brainer, but really trying to solve these problems in the nursing field introduces a really interesting challenge for us as we try to navigate what that looks like. So yeah, that's inspiration from the Female Quotient and Future Brilliance for sure. You are on mute.
Yeah, thank you. That's wonderful to hear that there was there was like almost this, there was a needs assessment as opposed to it being driven by, oh, we have the textbooks, so let's do this, or something where it doesn't come from an assessment of what a need is on the ground. So that's great to hear. Are there plans for other areas that you will expand into beyond nursing?
For sure. So from the Sandbox perspective, we're really interested. We have a huge focus on cybersecurity. And so there's all of that we're working on, looking at post-quantum cryptography, what that might look like from our perspective. But I know that, the sky's the limit. The LibreTexts content, crosses so many disciplines. There's no reason why we couldn't have that tool apply to any of that content on there. But of course, like Delmar said, we always want to make sure we have a human in the loop, so to speak. Like, we don't want to be that bull in the china shop that I said. We want to do this in a mindful way and make sure that we have the content authors play a role. That was really important to us, being on the board of the WebRec project, that we always wanted to have the content authors in the loop and giving feedback and being able to make updates. So I think that this needs to be community driven, and Delmar does that really beautifully, making sure that all of this work is community driven.
Great, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess we're ending time. So with that, thank Marianna, Constantine, and Paul for chiming in, or coming and presenting everything that we've been pursuing the last 4 months or so. It's been a whirlwind experience so far, and we're very excited about where it's going. So if anyone has any questions or concerns about what we're doing, feel free to contact me directly at delmar@libretext.org. I can hand you off to Marianna, Constantine if there are more details that I can't address, and then look forward to hearing more about this as the year progresses. So thanks everyone for attending, and feel free to enjoy the rest of your Tuesday.